G'day everyone and welcome to another edition of Tuesday Night Live, brought to you by Crowcast, of course. Lots going on in AFL world and in Crow's Land, so without any further ado, let's get straight into it, shall we? Good evening and welcome to Tuesday Night Live, this Tuesday the 3rd of May. Nearly Star Wars Day, Peter. How are you going, mate?
Very well, mate. I feel very rested and happy with my week on the Sunshine Coast. It was very nice.
Right, and you've come back and brought some pretty average weather with you starting tomorrow. Going to be freezing.
I was not happy to see that, I can tell you.
Never mind. Did you wouldn't have seen any of the footy up there while you're up there, would you?
And I saw, funnily enough, I saw the first half on my phone lying on Mooloolaba Beach. So I did actually ruin my day by watching the first half, but then I shut it down.
Right. And what did you think of that half?
Jeez. I mean, there was just nothing. I mean, yeah, we come on, don't we? And we're positive, and we generally like to see. We try and pick out the positive bits. We acknowledge that we're rebuilding and all that stuff. But I just could not find you anything out of that first half that I could really chat to you about. To be honest, is that fair?
That is quite reasonable. We just came out sluggish. They came out firing, as many predicted, after the pressure that the coach was under during the week. And, gee whiz, they just destroyed us. And, of course, once the lads kicked into gear, it was all effort and no system, unfortunately. And what that meant is that it was just beast or honeypot. And we weren't able to move the ball with any fluidity or get on the outside at all. I put some stats up on Sunday, and some of the stats were just horrific at halftime. I think we're minus 40 something in uncontested posies and minus 20 something in contested posies. It was just a shit show, really.
Well, it was one of those games that you just knew what was happening, how it was going to turn out in the first few minutes, really.
It really was, Pete. It really was.
And I felt like Toby Green just stamped himself. He just willed himself to that mark, and he was just determined, as great players are. He was just determined to stamp himself on that game, and that was it, really.
Yep. Now, is it one that you just put away and put it down to, one of those weeks? I mean, we are a young side, the youngest in the comp, pretty much, and we're going to be prone to ups and downs on the journey back to relevance. Is it a game that you just put down to one of those days and you move on?
It's really strange, isn't it, that we've had 2 years running where we have made that team look like world beaters. And last year, they only won 11 games last year. And yet they came over here and looked like a grand final side. And then they've won them 5 when they got here this year, and then we've made them look like a grand final team again. It's weird. We just don't seem to match up well with them at all.
I think it's size, Peter. They are a very physically mature team, and that doesn't go away irrespective of form. And I think we got hustled and bustled out of the contest early. They hit the ball extremely hard, and they ran particularly hard and brushed us aside. And we do have some mature bodies running through the midfield, but by and large we're still probably a little bit light, and we just look like we got monstered physically.
Yeah, look, I think we're going to have some of those games. And it's kind of unfortunate that the wins that we have we just get there, but some of the losses we have are terrible, aren't they?
Yeah.
So,
well,
and I think
sorry, go on.
I talked earlier, Fane, about percentage being a good indicator of where you're at. And I think that's because it indicates to you, how bad your losses are. And yeah, we've had a couple of really bad losses.
I think that's true. That's true of the whole table at the moment. We can see the table starting to form, and a couple of the teams that are outside of the 8 at the moment are running with pretty good percentage. And the team we're actually up against this week, Carlton, probably the most vulnerable percentage-wise in the 8. And I think you're exactly right. It is a good indicator. Our wins have all been close. And one close loss as well, but 2 blowouts. So this week's game against Carlton, I think, is a real test for the footy club with regards to where we sit in terms of our development. Because aside from it being, are we playing away this week? We're playing away this week, aren't we? Of course.
We are at Marvel, yes.
Yeah, at Marvel. Aside from it being away, it's on a deck that should suit us. There certainly won't be any weather implications. They've got a couple of guns, but they've got a couple out as well. The Ruckman's out and 1 or 2 others. It's an opportunity for us to bounce back, and it'll be a test of our current progress, I think, to see this result.
Yep. No, I agree, because I think as the season goes on, I think that Carlton will fall away. I think that they'll do their usual thing of falling back out. I don't think they'll make the 8. And so I think that it's a team, these are one of those games you can target and say, well, this is one that we could and should possibly win.
Well, absolutely. I think that's true. There's no reason why we can't win the game. Carlton certainly aren't world beaters by any stretch. I mean, they've started the season off well, but as I suspected, their depth is being tested at the moment in a couple of areas. They've got some good targets up forward that really are, elite in the competition. Really, Curnow and Mackay has really come on this year. But they are vulnerable in certain areas and definitely gettable if we're playing well. So, this is probably one of the more important games for the club, I would think, in the last couple of seasons, because last year after our loss to GWS, mate, we tanked basically.
Well, we're exactly where we were last year: 3 wins, 3 losses, and then a spanking from GWS. It's quite bizarre the way that worked out.
Yeah. And I think our following few games after the GWS loss last year were pretty average. So, it'll be an interesting thing to see if we can reverse that this season. A couple of injury concerns. Of course, we're going to be missing Brodie Smith, who took a specky and forgot to land. He'll be out for a couple, I'd imagine, and hopefully only a couple with concussion, given his history. Hopefully there's no longer-term effects on that one. And McHenry, who didn't fail the protocol during the course of the game, but has since come up with concussion symptoms, so he's out as well. So they're 2 forced changes. Who else have we got? I think they're the only 2 out from the weekend. Riley Thilthorpe is expected back after going through his COVID protocols. His knee's fine. And Andy McPherson as well is due back from his hammy. So a couple to chew. Well, a reasonably full complement to choose from. Zach Taylor's still out with his thumb, and of course we've got the season. Well, I mean, Seedsman could be anything, and Sloaney out for the season. So first of all, who do you see coming in for Smithers and Ned? 2 forced changes.
They're not usually terribly covert about it. They tend to, I've just noticed in recent times that they'll get assistant coaches out there and start talking up players. And so I've heard, in the last couple of days, I've heard 3 players talked up by assistant coaches. They've talked up Miller, they've talked up Worrell, they've talked up Church.
Oh, you've gone a bit robotic there. So they were Millerer and
Newchurch
yeah,
and Worrell. Josh Worrell.
yeah, yeah. They have been the three that have been bandied around.
So I would suspect, if going on form, and I'm talking about the way they approach the media, that the replacements, that those three would be in the mix.
Yep. I don't know whether you're on a wireless connection or whatever, but it's gone a bit funny, so you might have to move somewhere.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's good.
Yep.
Yeah, a bit disappointed. I'd be disappointed if Hinge didn't come back in, because I thought he was going particularly well. And to me, he seems the obvious replacement for Brodie Smith off half-back. They're talking about Miller, and his obvious role would be the half-back line, unless they're thinking of putting him into the midfield mix, which I think would be a stretch. So Miller ahead of Hinge for Smithers would be disappointing for me. In terms of McHenry, if they're thinking of giving Tariq a run, it's probably a reasonable deck to give him a run on. There won't be any weather. Fast track. He's been playing okay, certainly improved. Does he deserve a call up over Jimmy Rowe? I'm not so sure. Jimmy offers a fair bit up the ground, which is the role that McHenry and Lockie Murphy have been playing over the last few weeks. Will we get the same from Tariq? I don't think so. We'll get a crumbing forward, but I don't know, Pete. I don't know if it's the right move. I don't know whether, having a look at highlights and all the rest of it, he's done some nice things, but can he give us 4 quarters in an AFL match that's going to be pretty quick?
Yeah, it's like picking the raw untried fast bowler for a test at the Wacker.
Yep.
You want to just let him loose on that fast track.
Yep. To see how he goes.
So I wouldn't do it myself, but I'm only going on what's in the media.
Yeah. Look, I have to just take a moment just to thank everyone who's joined us on Discord and also on YouTube. I've got the chat back up and running. So that's all good. If you are on Discord and you want to have something to say during the course of the show, just stick your hand up and we'd be happy to have you on board. In the meantime, there's probably a couple of other players that have had a questionable couple of games. We won't dwell on them, Pete, but we need to mention them. Matty Crouch looked, I'm going to say pedestrian against GWS. Will they persist?
Well, they will. And I think we both know they will, because they've lost Brodie Smith, so they just won't drop as an experienced player. Simple as that. They will not drop him because they've lost Brodie Smith.
Robot again. I agree with you. They have this thing where they need to have experience. I don't know what benefit Crouch gives us. Experience, Tex Walker's a prime example, Pete, where good experience is very, very valuable. But Rory Sloane has shown us in his stint in the middle that your experience is no good if it's not performing, and I'd put Matt Crouch in that non-performing experience at the moment. And the problem with Matt is that I don't think we can do what we tried to do with Sloaney before he did his knee and drop him into a half-forward flank. I think Matt's a one-trick pony, and I don't think he would give us any value at half-forward. He'd probably get a bit of the ball, but he can't kick over a jam jar. I don't know. I just don't see him in any other role except in purely inside mid.
Yeah, look, I totally agree with you. I don't think he deserves his spot at the moment. I just don't think they'll pull the trigger.
Yeah, no, you're probably right. Jack Haitley had a up and down sort of game. He was better in the second half last week after the game had really been pretty much lost already. He's an interesting one, Jackson. To me, he lacks a yard and he lacks some intensity. I'm loath to drop a kid without giving him a block of games. What's your thoughts on that one?
Yep. I think I said last week, you've got to give him a month. I think you've got to give him 4 games
Yeah.
to try and cement his position. I think he's done enough. You wouldn't be expecting him to do a whole lot. But he's been getting his, in the mid-teens position.
Yeah, you've gone again. That connection's no good for you tonight, mate. Yeah, I'd give him a run still. I wouldn't.
I'm sorry, I'm here now. Am I here? Have you
Yeah,
got
you're
me?
here now. Yeah.
Sorry, Fian, I'm not sure why my connection's bad tonight. Must be just the Wi-Fi playing up.
Yeah, must be.
Lockie Gallant, what do you think there?
Oh no, we've got to persist with Lockie. I think our midfield performance or our transition work last week didn't do the forwards any favours whatsoever. Neither he nor Elliott. But whereas you expect Elliott to make contests, Lockie's not. It shouldn't be used in that same way, and our unpredictability going forward just didn't serve Lockie Gallant in any way. I feel like Lockie's form or impact has dropped off with the inclusion of Shane McAdams. So whether there's a balance issue there, I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
And we're not seeing a lot defensively from Gallant either. Probably seeing a little bit more defensively from Shane McAdam at the moment. But I'd just loathe to drop the kid, at least for this week, given that it's going to be a fast game on a dry deck. Plays into his style of footy, and we've seen what he can do. I don't think this is the week to drop him, but they might.
Yeah, him because he's had a good block of games and he's just fallen away a bit the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I just don't think it was for lack of trying last week. I just don't think it was the game for him.
Yeah.
So I'd be very interested to see how he goes this week, and I hope they keep him in for one more. Fisher Mackesy in the twos has been tried up forward with reasonable effect. Hit the scoreboard last week and took a couple of grabs and had a few kicks, so he's not going too bad. Josh Worrell, obviously, in a defensive role. Now, here's an interesting one. If you're talking matchups with Carlton forwards, Geordie Butts is obviously going to have first crack at McKay. Do you play Billy or do you play Tom Diday on Curnow?
You probably could play Tom because I don't think they've got, from memory, I don't think they've got another other than those two. So I think you could have Billy as more the floater. Have they got a third tall there? I don't think they have they?
Not one that springs to mind.
No. I think that you could get away with Billy being a bit freer than what he was. They made him pretty accountable. I mean, in that first half that I saw,
It was exactly
West did a very good job of making him accountable.
It's exactly what we said last week, Peter, about tunnelling through Billy and how he would go when they targeted through Billy. And Jesse Hogan touched him up pretty much.
Yeah, he did.
And that's
so
going
I
to be
wouldn't
the
mind that
problem
matchup with Tom. I think it's a good matchup.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that's the way it should start. Tom's got a little bit more smarts in the air and he doesn't mind body contact. There's obviously more value coming in as a third tall, but I think even though he'd be giving away probably, 4 or 5 inches on Curnow, I think he's probably first crack, to be honest with you.
Yep.
I'm just having a quick look at Carlton's lineup last week just to see who, because I haven't watched a hell of a lot of Carlton this year, I've got to say. I can't think of who else they might have up forward. McKay, Durden, Curnow, Zach Fisher, Jack Carroll, Jack Martin. So a lot of mid-sized players there, really.
Yep.
The other one is Lockie Shoal. I think you can probably sit on either side of the fence with Lockie. I think we've got to accept the sort of player that he is, and that he's not going to be, an aggressive player. But by the same token, I want him to get numbers that justify his position, and I don't think he's getting the numbers that we need him to get in the right areas, Pete, at the moment.
I feel like he's stagnated a bit, Fiend,
He's
from the
just,
start of last year.
yeah, he's not as attacking. I'm just as we're talking here, I'm just going to call up his stats from last week, because he just seems to be doing enough without doing a lot, if that makes sense. Where are you, Lockie? Far too many lock-ons in our team. Here we go, Lockie Shaw. The one that I want is inside 50s. Where are you? Inside 50s. So you only had one inside 50 from Lockie Shaw last week. Score involvements, also only one. Now, he's supposed to be, in my opinion, our attacking wingman. We tend to play one wing off the back and one wing sort of more forward of the ball. I don't feel, I don't feel like we're getting enough from Scholl at the moment, and those two areas, in my opinion, are the key stats. The inside 50s, the score involvements. We want him to be delivering because he's got a nice leg, and I don't feel like we're getting any value for him at the moment.
No, and I struggle to think about how often he might have, hit targets inside 50, and what he's doing in 2020. I just haven't really seen it. There's not a lot of hurt factor.
No.
I think is that what you're kind of referring to. Like, it just seems to be chipping it a bit when he does get it. So I don't see much hurt factor there from Lockie. Like, it doesn't really seem to be cutting teams. Those sort of cutting kicks through the middle or opening up the play. He's got that tremendous leg.
Mm.
But you're right, we're not getting the value.
You only used it 5 times on the weekend, Pete. 13 touches, 5 kicks.
Yeah,
60 metres gained from your wingman.
Yeah. No.
I think it's time for Lockie to have a break, to be honest with you.
Mm.
I think he lacks confidence over the ball at the moment. I don't want him to be a bullocking, bustling player. That's not him. But I still feel like he's a little bit light. And I feel like at times he's tentative. I've noticed over the last couple of weeks there's been a couple of times where it's not that he's shirked the contest, but he just hasn't gone when he's needed to, if you know what I mean. There was a moment the week before last where he really hesitated in defence, where he could have laid a tackle and it resulted in a goal to the opposition where he really could have blocked. And he got a bit of a serve from one of his teammates, I can't remember. It could have been Duday actually, or Luke Brown maybe. I wouldn't be opposed at all to giving Lockie a run in the twos for a couple of weeks.
Mm.
Yeah, so if that's the one. He got out of the way of Treloar.
I think there needs to be some unforced changes, doesn't there?
Oh, look, I think so. I think Harry Schoenberg did enough to warrant staying in, Pete. His numbers after when he came on were quite reasonable. He had 9 touches in a quarter and a bit of footy, 133 metres gained. So I felt like he did okay. A lot rides on what they want to do with Matt Crouch, to be perfectly honest with you, because if they don't want to drop Matt Crouch, which we kind of the opinion that they don't, then where does Harry come in to that? If he stays in, he's got to replace either Smithers or McHenry, or someone else has got to come out.
Yep.
Is it time? See, Braden Cook. I feel like he's had a nice little run of games, and I would be loath to drop Braden as well.
Yeah,
But they might sacrifice him to get Harry back in the team, which I think would be disappointing.
absolutely.
And then it becomes a bit of slim pickings. I mean, do you drop Lockie Murphy? Well, he was. I mean, they're all. We can't really single out players because most of them were ineffective last week. I personally think Schomburg might come in for Lockie Scholl, and we might do a bit of a shuffle.
Yep.
That's what I think. So you're talking about Miller coming in for Smithers. You're talking about maybe Tariq or Jimmy Rowe in for McHenry. Schomburg in for Lockie is one unforced change. And look, it's probably 50-50 whether Lockie Gallant comes out. But if Lockie Gallant comes out, who fills that spot? Who comes in as that third tall? I don't think they'd bring in Fisher Mackesy to that role. So do we go small, or again, does Rowe and Tariq come in that forward?
Well, whether potentially Riley Thilthorpe is fit and ready to go. That's, I guess, another option. He had been playing very well.
Yeah, coming off a week and a half spell though, because he did his knee in that, or hurt his knee in that Centrals game. Would they bring him back in? Because I don't think it's a bad idea. I'm an advocate for running three tools. I think it's time that we tried it. It was very interesting. Mark Bickley on the radio the other day, it might have been yesterday even, or could have even been today, I don't know, said that no team runs two ruckmen successfully. That's a lot of bullshit.
Well,
Melbourne are doing it. Essendon are doing it. Like, there's a few teams that are playing two rucks very successfully, and I think we've actually got the ability with our current list to do that. And I actually wish we did that last week against Bruce and Flynn, because Riley O'Brien got torched, and we had no point of difference there. And if we'd have had a kid like Riley up there with a point of difference, a nice mobile lad that can compete in the ruck and start to make Bruce and Flynn accountable around the deck, well, I'd be quite happy to have Riley in and run the three of them, Elliott, Riley and O'Brien. Whether they consider that, I don't know. Would you consider giving O'Brien... O'Brien really had his colours lowered on the weekend. Strawn continues to be okay.
He's in the same basket as Matt Crouch, Rob, unfortunately. And he's had his colours lowered a few times this year, let's be honest.
Yeah.
He has not had a good year at all.
Yeah. Do you know, he had seven hit-outs to advantage against GWS. He had a hit-out win rate of about 30%. So I think it was about 28-odd hit-outs from memory. I could probably find it. Hit-outs, 27 hit-outs, Riley O'Brien. Only 7 of those hit-outs went to advantage. Like a massive stat. His attendances were 80 something. He wins 27 of them, and only 7 of them are essentially effective. How can you actually get first use when your ruckman's getting destroyed like that?
Yeah. No, agreed. I'd have Strawn in there for sure.
Yeah. Well, I'd be happy, like I said, I'd be happy for them to run Strawn, RT and Himmelberg, and see if we can do, because dry deck, the ball's going to be in the air a fair bit, and yes, it's fast, but it also suits marking. It's an area I think that we can exploit, Carlton, and it'd be interesting to see if they do it, but they're quite conservative. There's no other. I don't know where we fit Josh Worrell in that, mate. As much as his form warrants selection, he really is a third tall, isn't he, down back? We've already got 3 that seem to be going all right.
Yeah. He absolutely is. And, I'm only saying it because he was being talked up in the media by the assistant coaches.
Yeah.
I don't know where you slot him in. but he seems to be in the frame. So I don't know whether they're, are they talking about maybe bringing him in to play as a third tall forward and getting rid of McAdam? I don't know. I guess that's potential.
Yeah.
Or maybe bringing him in for Gallant.
Yeah. I seem to recall that he had played forward at some stage, but I don't think we've played him in the twos up forward much, have we?
No, so it's it's hard for him to make that transition, you would think, but yeah, I'm just not sure where else you would play him, to be honest, because he can't play as a key.
No, I don't know, and he hasn't got the wheels to play on a wing or something like that, I don't think.
No, so I'm not quite sure what they've got in mind for him, other than talking him up.
Yeah, so I agree. So selection, I think, is going to be quite interesting this week, Peter. I think it's a very important game, and the one thing that I'm starting to be really frustrated about is this lack of our selection committee and our coaching panel to shake up the midfield. Again, we saw far too much of the Keys-Crouch-led combination, and we only saw a bit of Josh Rochelle towards the end. We didn't see any Lockie Murphy. We didn't see any Ned McHenry. We didn't see Harry go into the midfield when he came on. Jack Haitley wasn't there. And yet, this is the thing. Jack Haitley, we're selecting him, wanting him to become our inside mid, or an inside mid, and we play him sort of high half forward, sort of wing area. What the hell? Like, it's a failed tactic.
And all of his Sandford football that gets him in there has all been as a centre square midfielder.
Exactly. There was a very good post on Big Footy by Spackler, and he made the point that in days gone past, all our midfielders plied their trade running off halfback until they graduated to the midfield. You think about McLeod and Goodwin and Edwards and that. They all started off playing off halfback, and Macca actually made halfback a bit of his own later in his career as well. The only one who didn't was Rue, and that was because he was an out-and-out forward. These days we seem to be putting him in the graveyard at half forward, and I don't think I think we've burnt too many midfielders with that. I 100% agree with what Spackler was saying. We put Gallucci there, we put Paholke there, we've put Schoenberg there, we put lots of up-and-coming midfield. Luke Pedler's played forward. Running at the ball seems to be a far better opportunity for these blokes to get the speed of the game and a combination of learning defensive side of the game but also being able to use their weapons. We don't seem to do it anymore.
Yeah. Well, the obvious example in modern football is Callum Mills.
Exactly, 100%.
Played 3 years as a halfback. And then you got Andy Mcgrath at Essendon. He played at halfback.
Yeah. Well, just as an aside, Peter, Andy Mcgrath, a little bird told me last week that the Crows are pretty much heavily into Andy Mcgrath. And I've been told today that he's put his contract on hold, put contract talks on hold.
I saw that.
One. Yeah, well, I got told last week by someone who you and I would both consider a reliable source of information that we were into him in a big way.
Well, yeah, I got that message as well.
There you go.
We generally both get messages from that particular
Yeah, I asked that person just before I came on whether I could use it, and he said yes.
And he's pretty happy with his source that we've thrown the kitchen sink at Andy Mcgrath. And he dropped that a couple of weeks ago, Fane, didn't he? And then he popped up today. Guess what? Guess who's put his contract on hold? Yeah.
So watch this space on Andy Mcgrath. And we'll put our stake in, what is it, the 3rd of May? 3rd of May it is, before anyone else has said a bloody word about it. So you heard it here first on Crowcast. And no, they didn't say Andy Marr, they said Andy Mcgrath. Someone on chat
A few
being
people
funny.
asked in the chat, very, very good player, Andy Mcgrath. Very good player.
Yeah, well, they're all going on about his height again, but he's got class all over him, and he's the type of player that we don't have at the moment in the midfield.
Yep. Exactly.
And look, I'm starting to actually, in terms of height, I've started to, as much as I would like a nice big-bodied mid like a Bontempelli or a Cripps or something like that. Seeing the way Lockie Murphy has operated around stoppage clearance, Peter, and the couple of times that he's attended CBAs and done well,
Yep.
I don't really give a shit what their size is. Have they got burst speed? Can they get separation? And can they deliver constructively? Lockie Murphy's shown that when he's around the contest, he can do that. Andy Mcgrath can definitely do that. I wouldn't have a problem at all. It
would be one of the biggest, if you consider, Andy McGrath, classic Sandy Dragons, Vic Metro, #1 draft pick in the prime of his career at a major Melbourne club. This would be one of the biggest recruiting coups our club has made.
The biggest.
It would just about be the biggest.
It would, in terms of those parameters. I mean, obviously we did a number on the Dockers for Bungie, but he was still an unknown, a reasonable bet, but still an unknown quantity at that stage. But in terms of an established player, see, I would have put Geordie Dawson probably in the top 3. And all due respect to Geordie, I reckon McGrath's got a little bit more pedigree on him.
Yep.
So, yeah, very interesting. I wouldn't mind him in our mix at all, to be perfectly frank. So watch this space. Anyway, how we got to that? Yeah, we were talking about that, stodgy mix that we've currently got. I just don't understand why I don't understand, Peter, how the coaches don't see it. What are they looking at that makes them go back to that well every week ad infinitum and getting the same results? What makes them go back to that well without changing it up?
Yeah. And it's been going on since 2018, Fee.
Well, even before, really. We saw Richie Douglas play 2 years in the mids when he was shot, and we were calling him shot. They've done it for a long, long time. I don't know what it is. Is VB the constant there? I don't know. I don't know.
It's a stacked midfield.
That was the most alarming comment I've heard come out of Nix's mouth since he's been at our club, to be honest with you. It's stacked, but it's not stacked positively. I won't be derogatory because they're all trying their hardest, but it's not a good combination. I've said before that I don't mind Matt Crouch at the coalface if he's in touch, but we can't surround him with other slow inside players. Laird to me gets you more value at the contest, and you get a little bit more outside from Laird. Why have Laird and Crouch in that combination? And you throw Sam Berry into the mix, who again is a coalface player, but can also get separation. Tends to be moving forward with the ball through the congestion, so we get a positive movement instead of all this out the back crap that we get from Matty Crouch all the time. So then you got 3 of them. It's not the right combination. I just don't know what they're looking at that makes them think, yeah, this is the combination we want to run with again this week.
Yep.
I'd love to know. I wish I could get a coach on to ask that question because, they know better than us. They're in and around the club every day, but there are times where I think being in and around the club every day is actually a negative. And I asked this question of Hamish Ogilvie when I interviewed him last season about benchmarking. And I just wonder what sort of benchmarking goes on a week-by-week basis in terms of, yes, they might be, rusted on at the club, but how do they actually stack up? How do they stack? I would hazard a guess and say that only Ben Keys at the moment stacks up to the rest of the competition. Certainly
you can have a discussion, Fane, and we've talked about it, and you can go back and look at the drafting, really since Dangerfield.
Yeah.
We haven't I mean, we just seem to want to draft for every single position on the field, bar the midfield. And it's quite extraordinary, really. If you and I've done it, if you want to go back through the drafts all the way back to Dangerfield, there's basically no midfielders in the first rounds. We're talking about the first and second round.
Well,
and what we've done is we've cobbled together a lad from the rookie list who was a small defender. Matt Crouch was a second rounder. Rory Sloane was a third rounder.
Yeah.
Ben Keys was off the scrap heap. He was a delisted free agent.
Yeah.
And year in, year out, particularly in the last 3 or 4 years, we've gone to the draft with high picks, and we do not pick midfielders. And
no, that's not true, Peter. That's not true. Gallucci, Chase Jones.
Well, Gallucci was a failed, yeah.
Yeah, no, but they were midfielders.
So true. Chase Jones was a midfielder, failed.
So you can say that we have gone for midfielders, we've gone for the wrong type.
Yep. No, that's fair. No, sorry, yeah, you're right. That's fair call. Shelley looks great, but we talked about it last year that he looks great and all the rest of it. But is he we've got to get midfield time out of him.
Yeah, I think they've shown that they want him to be in there. He's attended, in his first half a dozen games, he's attended a reasonable amount of centre bounce action. So that's obviously in their mind. You look at him in traffic. There was I think it was last week. I think it was where he was involved in a centre bounce attendance, and he looked like the game was quite slow around him. You get players like Jarman used to be, where they just had an extra moment. Rochelle looked a bit like that. He didn't panic in tight, kept his composure and kept his feet, which is a big thing because you never see our midfielders keep their feet. So I reckon he'll be in the mix. But you're right, Peter. I mean, barring those couple that I mentioned, we've still gone for Mackesy with a first-round pick. We've still gone for Fogarty with a first-round pick. We went for Today with a first-round pick.
Miller.
Miller would have been recruited as a midfielder, you reckon?
Well, it seems to be. Possibly, but he's turned into a wing half-back, and we just... the thing is that even if we draft them as midfielders, we just can't seem to turn them into midfielders.
Well, and you wonder what they're looking at again in terms of, physicality. I mean, Gallucci, I reckon, was failed development, to be perfectly honest with you. I think he became disengaged because he wasn't getting a run in the midfield. He couldn't break the Crouch triumvirate. And I reckon he lost his motivation and went off the rails a bit. But Jones, for all Chase's good qualities, there's no way with what was around him. There's no way he should have been the one getting picked there. I don't know. And yes, he's coming out. It's fantastic in the Tassie League, but let's have a look at the pool of talent in that league. And I don't know. It was an odd pick by Hamish, that one.
Yep.
So it's a combination, I think, of poor picks and picking for... Fisher Mackesy is one that I wouldn't have gone for. I know that they were sweating on Daniel Talia, but to me, you're more likely picking up a rookie rough and raw defender like a Nick Murray to cover than you are picking an elite midfielder. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh.
So you take the midfielder at the top end of the draft every time. Interesting times, Peter. But we get Mcgrath in there and all is forgiven. Well, we'd have to have the cap space at the moment for Mcgrath, surely.
Well, you'd think so. I'd just be surprised if there wasn't a Victorian club that wouldn't have the cap space too, but who knows?
So where would the connection be to bring him to South Australia?
I had a look at it. There's just not one. This would just be purely plucking a guy out, saying this is a contract you can't refuse.
Yeah, it's going to have to be massive. going to have to be a massive contract. He's going to have
I
to
mean,
become probably a top 15 paid player in the league to come here.
yeah. He's just a quintessential, like Big Vic Club, #1 draft pick, Sandy Dragons, Vic Metro. You couldn't imagine grabbing him. Really couldn't.
Well, because Collingwood are tight on cap space, so they might be a bit stifled. St Kilda, maybe, I don't know. Not really a spot for him at the Bulldogs. Not really a spot for him at Carlton, and they'd have to be a bit tapped out on salary cap as well at the moment. Richmond, you'd think that there wouldn't be a hell of a lot of room in that cap. So maybe that's the deal. Maybe we're pricing the Vics out of the market on this one.
Maybe. And maybe, look, who knows? Maybe he's just had enough at Essendon. You wouldn't be surprised, would you?
If he's delayed contract talks, he's definitely out of Essendon. And why wouldn't he be? That's a shit show at the moment. I don't know what's going on there. It hasn't recovered from when Worsfold was there. It's a whole weird situation going on, and they seem to be turning on Benny Rutten a bit. And can Ben coach? Who knows?
What did he be? 24, 25, right?
Yeah, mid-20s.
Perfect. It'd be perfect to give him a 5-year deal.
Yeah. Well, and as we said before, right in that age group that we lack.
Yep. So he would be a good get. I mean, he's not a superstar. He's not an All-Australian or anything like that, but he could be gettable, and he's a solid for me. He's just a solid A-grade midfielder that would come in easily, be in our first starting midfield. Easily.
Yeah. Yeah, 24 in June, Vardy Magic says. Thank you, Vardy. You always come through with the numbers when we need them. Has he got any ceiling left in him, do you reckon? He's only been playing mids a couple of seasons, hasn't he, really?
Yeah. Because he played a lot of his early football at half-back, so he's probably still got a bit of growth left in him. If he's only 25, he would have played maybe 100 games. So,
Yeah, just looking where he sits on the rankings here. Yeah, I'd be chucking money at him. It might be a little bit of a reach to get him over. He's still probably in their midfield. Do you reckon he sits behind Merritt and Parrish?
Yeah. But they're two pretty handy players, don't you think?
Oh, well, yeah, that's right. I guess my only concern is without being sort of third string to those, has he got that kind of... You'd want him to have that kind of ceiling, I think.
Yeah. I don't think he would have. I just think that you've got to... I mean, in this league, it's not like you can just go to the shop and pick him. You've got to see, who's available and who would come.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right, very good.
And
all right.
Would he be, I mean, he would instantly be our probably second best midfielder.
Who would he be behind?
Well, I'd still have him behind Keys, I reckon. I reckon Keys is pretty good.
Would you?
Yep.
Well, I guess so. I had this discussion with someone on Big Footy today about Keys, and the guy took Miller in his top 20 or so and thought Ben Keys was a midfielder, and then when you actually compare Took Miller and Ben Keys' stats for this season, you realise they're the same player, and Benny Keys has actually got him on most of the meaningful stats. So, yeah, that's probably a fair call. I'd have Benny in my top 25 mids, probably at the bottom end of that top 25 mids, which means he's a second pick midfielder in most teams. I think that's probably reasonable, don't you think?
He's currently in the All-Australian squad of 40. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And it will just depend upon how his season pans out as to whether he can...
Yeah. The other one that's had a bit of a sniff around for some people is Dunkley from the Bulldogs. And it was Sloane Ranger who came on the chat, I think, last week and put the kibosh on that. The idea is that Dunkley's partner plays netball in South Australia. But she said that it would be unlikely that Dunkley would move over just for that. So, I don't know. She bloody wet blanket Lone Ranger. But, yeah. So, Dunkley would be fantastic in terms of a get. But I'd be happy with Mcgrath at this stage.
I'd be very happy if we could get him. I'd still be, as much as I think the source is pretty good, I would still be massively surprised if we got that over the line.
Well, the source says that we're into him, so that's no guarantee. I've got no doubt that the source is on the money. We'd definitely be into him, but as you rightly point out, Pete, we wouldn't be orphans in that regard, and it's a matter of whether we want to splash the cash.
Yep, that's it.
Jason Horn-Francis won the Rising Star nod this weekend, so he joins our lad as being a nominee. Fired up a bit too, Jason, so on the weekend might be getting a little bit frustrated already there at North. We should be dangling something in front of him.
Yeah, he'll be on the plane back home to Port Adelaide before you know it.
Yeah, I reckon you're right. All right, before we wrap up, just a quick word on the tipping. I suck. Is that any surprise, Peter?
No surprise, mate.
I got 5, so I was up on my average of 4.7, which I was very pleased about. But it's round 7, and I'm already trying to pick out the roughies to get myself back in the ball game. Shame. Harry M still on top with 46. We've got a few on 45. Kirk, Pogger, and Brett. On 44, we've got Terry, Barry, William, and Elvis. A few dropped out actually. Nadine dropped down. Claire dropped down. So a couple of notables. Where's Razor? Razor's nowhere, but I can't talk because I'm not even on the front 50. Where am I now? 77. 77 out of 96, Pete. And I'm on here talking crap about the footy as if I know stuff.
People that know anything about football are the worst tipsters because they overthink it.
Well, I would say to my kids, do as I say, not as I do. So I would say to the listeners, tip as I say, not as I do. I don't know. Anyway, the B&F that we've got running at the moment, the casters, Nikki, myself, and Macca. At the moment, we have Benny Keys on 63, Geordie Dawson on 46, Joshua Shelley on 30, Laird 28, Walker 25, Smith 23, and then it tails off. The listeners, Geordie Dawson on 73, Benny Keys 64, Walker 49, Rochelle 47, Himmelberg 31, Laird 28. So not a huge amount of difference between the top half a dozen between the esteemed podcast hopes and the valued listeners there, and we'll keep updating that every week. Don't forget, after the games, stick your best and fairest in the best and fairest channel so that I can see them, otherwise I'll miss them. Oh, so this week, Pete, Carlton, what's your feel? We're going to bust back?
No, I don't think we will. I think it's one of those games. Carlton away, we don't. Last time I think we beat Carlton away was when Paddy Dangerfield injured one of their players. A long time ago. No, I can't see it. I can't see it at Marvel. I think Carlton will win that one.
Yeah, I'm actually going a different way. I think they might be a bit stung now after last week. I think this year, as opposed to last, it would have surprised them more this year to get absolutely flogged like they did. I think they're probably not getting ahead of themselves, but I think their expectations of themselves would have been higher this season. And to get a belting handed to them like that, I think would have stung them rather than knocked them over. I expect them to bounce back this week. I think it'll be a very tight game. Carlton is still a good side, even with their outs. But I'm tipping us by a whisker.
Very good.
And considering my track record, bit of chat about Lukosius and Rankin on there as usual. Pete, I don't want Rankin, and my word is that Lukosius is going to Port if he's coming back here, and he's more than likely to stay out there anyway.
Yeah, I think they're both. Nah, I'm excited about Andy Mcgrath. Let's get him.
Yep, me too.
He's a worker. He's a hard worker.
Yep, I'd be more than happy. All right, well, nothing happening in the chat in terms of people want to have their say. We're coming up to the hour, so I think that's time to call it. It's been a nice, short, sharp cast tonight, Peter. Covered plenty of stuff.
Sounds good, mate.
And thanks to everyone who's joined us on Discord and on YouTube. Don't forget, if you want to support the podcast, you can go to patreon.com/AFL Crowcast and become a patron. All the support from Patreon and all our members is most appreciated. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to give us a subscribe and a like if you haven't already. And don't forget to share our videos on socials when you get the opportunity. If you're listening on iTunes and you feel like giving us a review, that would be greatly appreciated as well. I think that's all the stuff I have to cover, Peter. I'll bid you.
Have a great week, and we look forward to watching the boys play on the weekend.
Absolutely. Thanks. Good night, everyone.
Cheers, mate. Good night, everyone.